Allahu Akbar! Death to America. Death to Israel. A curse upon the Jews. Victory for Islam. This is the new motto of Yemen, Bethiman. These are the words that are daily chanted outside the doors of the last Jews of Yemen. The current crisis in Yemen is significant for the world in general and for Israel in particular. Shema' Atzat Adonai Mahshubatav Asher Hashav El Yoshvei Bethiman. Words of the prophet Jeremiah. Hear the plan of the Lord, his thoughts regarding the inhabitants of Bethiman. Indeed, their children shall be dragged away, and it shall be a horror. And the sound of their outcry shall reach the Gulf of Aqaba. As a student of the Middle East, and as someone who's been interested in Bethiman in Yemen for the last 14 years, allow me to share with you how the current situation in Yemen developed, or rather deteriorated, over the last few years. Allow me to share with you who the major players are on the ground and what the current situation is of the last Jews of Yemen. Many of you are probably aware and probably able to identify where Yemen is on the map. But as we shall see, the definition of Yemen has changed many times over the last 100 years. From the ending of the Ottoman occupation, which extended into modern-day Yemen only in this green area, and lasted from the 16th century until the 19th century, until 1918, to when, in 1918, this area turned into a country called North Yemen, predominantly occupied by what are called Zaydi Muslims, a type of Shiite Islam. There's also one other minority group of Shiite Islam there, but together they've united the different tribes of that form of Islam to form what is now called the Houthi rebel movement. Houthi in name of the leader of this rebel revolt. They call themselves Ansar Allah, the partisans of Allah. So in 1918, this became its own country. Then in 1967, this area, predominantly occupied by Sunni Muslims, traditional opponents of Shiite Islam, became its own state in 1967. But it was only in 1990 that the two states joined together to be the modern Yemen. Now, how exactly did everything fall apart? Well, according to the UN, which you can find on their website, Yemen is the poorest country in the Middle East. Not only that, but it is the driest country in the world. The water table is more than 1,000 feet underground. So people are starving. Then, in the midst of this turmoil, in the midst of the Arab Spring, which spread across the Middle East in 2011, things started getting shaky in Yemen. By 2012, the Houthi rebels, upset with the corruption of their government and the dire poverty of their people, in 2012 coerced the then President Saleh to resign and leave his position as president. He was replaced by President Hadi, the previous vice president of Yemen. In 2013, Saudi Arabia, a traditional enemy of Shiite Islam, made matters even more difficult, and according to the Human Rights Watch website, expelled 300 to 400,000 Yemenite migrant workers from Saudi Arabia and spilled them all at once into Yemen's crisis. In the fall of 2014, the capital of Yemen fell. It fell to the Houthis, the rebels. They then took over the government buildings in Sana'a, Yemen's capital. And as with the previous president, coerced the then current president, President Hadi, to also resign together with his entire cabinet. And they fled to Aden. The Houthi movement took this as an opportunity for a coup d'etat. They overthrew the internationally recognized Yemen government. So now we have, as we began our presentation, a new government in Yemen with a new flag, the new government of Yemen, whose official motto is "Death to Israel, a curse be upon the Jews." These are the new guardians of Yemen's last Jews, 60 souls in all, 40 in Sana'a and 20 in Raida. Now, President Salah, before he was expelled, assured the peace and security of Yemen's last Jews, even saving them in 2008, according to the Washington Post, and transferring them to Sana'a after the then fledgling Houthi movement threatened to massacre Sadr's last Jews if they were not to leave within 10 days. So he moved them to Sana'a. And now the same movement that they fled has taken over Sana'a. But according to Eshator's interview, Eshator.com, their interview with an anonymous professor from Brandeis University, the current leadership of the Houthi movement is assuring Yemen's last Jews that they will not be harmed. But of course, how much assurance will that give to the Jews who see this chanted every day outside their doors? Death to Israel and a curse be upon the Jews. And also, as you know, from the examples of Moshe Nahari and others who in the last several years have been murdered by Houthi members, their security is under serious question. And for international concern, the Houthi movement, the Shiites, are in connection with Iran. So, if you consider the strategic position of Yemen in the world relative to the Red Sea, where the majority of the world's oil passes through, if the Houthi movement succeeds to have established rulership in Yemen long term, that could have dire effects not only for the people of Yemen, but also for all of Europe, essentially for America and for Israel. But even worse, you see this gray area? That gray area, which includes here near Yemen's capital, Sana'a, where the last Jews are, this represents Al-Qaeda of the Arab Peninsula. Al-Qaeda of the Arab Peninsula, just in February of this year, publicly announced its allegiance to ISIS, Daesh. The last Jews of Yemen's only hope is to trust in the faithfulness of the Houthis or to flee. But unfortunately, all the consulates have closed in Yemen. So now we see that the situation of the Jews in Yemen and of Yemen as a whole has great significance for the world as a whole, and also for Israel's own existence. All these issues, and like all wars, develop from ignorance, and ignorance can only be fought with knowledge. Knowledge leads us closer to understanding, and understanding to peace. And when the world is filled with understanding, then the words of the prophet Micah can be fulfilled, that they will turn their swords into plows, their spears into pruning shears, and then they will never train for war anymore. Can you רוצה?
What the situation is now?
At this current moment, the last...
Yeah.
Well, with regard to the Jews or the government?
The government.
So with regard to the government, I don't have all the sources.
After Saudi begin...
Yeah. So Saudi is now dropping bombs to try to fight the spread of the Houthi rebels. But the problem is that that just weakens the opposition to Al-Qaeda of the Arab Peninsula, which is actually very bad. But of course, both sides are bad. And President Hadi has changed his mind about resigning and is now trying to work with the Saudi government to somehow get formal control back over the government. But it seems pretty impossible because he's isolated. His supporters are isolated just to the area of Aden, which is a port city. So it's kind of a hopeless situation. We'll see what happens. I mean, it would require some major intervention because both sides of the fighting factions are opponents of the free world and not following any formal international law.
Thank you.
Thank you.